Hello everybody, welcome to Construct Strategically Yarns with Andy. Today I've got Ali. Ali is a site engineer that works on construction sites. But yeah, let's hear from him and welcome mate. Thank you for making the time to be here, really appreciate it.
I appreciate the invite, mate.
Yeah.
It's good to be on board on anything that's positive, that's trying to make a move forward in the industry.
That's what the podcast is all about. Help us understand your journey into construction and tell us a bit more about yourself.
I guess I got into construction following the footsteps of my father.
Interesting.
So I'm originally from Jordan.
Yeah.
My father's a contractor engineer.
Yeah.
And just sort of learning the ropes, going to work with them, all that kind of stuff when I was younger. So I decided, I'm doing civil engineering. Came to New Zealand.
Where did you do your civil engineering?
Sort of start of 2016, 17. Where? Auckland Uni.
Oh, AU. Right. Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. So it's been an exciting journey for that one.
Yeah. So how was engineering in AU? Was that difficult? Was that challenging?
It's quite up there. I remember at the time one of the it's 36th in the world for civil engineering at the time, so it was quite a reputable degree. Very, very stressful and hard to get through university, in all honesty, but worth it. I think looking back at university, it's always one of those things is that you understand how you should have studied more after you got into the industry rather than, when you're actually doing your degree, you're like, how am I going to use this? Or how does this actually turn into my job in the future?
In hindsight.
Yeah, in hindsight.
There we go. That's it.
Yeah.
But interesting course though. You enjoyed your journey through university?
100%, mate. 100%. And you get a lot about a feel of how important it is.
Yeah.
And then sort of linking it back to like our current role, it's kind of like, well, you don't have that, well, not me anyway, that connection back to university where you go back and you say like, guys, by the way, I think if we get the guys in university more involved with this aspect of construction or this aspect of construction, it feels like there's a little bit of a gap, which might be sort of addressed to get the guys on board knowing where they're heading.
Yeah. But think about it though, how much of what you actually learn in university or how many of those formulas do you actually remember?
Yeah.
Those theories do you remember?
Yeah.
I've always said this, it's like, what your engineering degree gives you is it trains your mind to think a certain way. And that sets you up for success in the real world.
100%.
Yeah, it's all those theories and all those papers that you write, great during university.
Yeah.
But what's that really doing for you?
Yeah.
That's setting your mind frame to structure in a particular way.
It's all not bad news because you do get your internships and all that kind of stuff, which gets you in the real life, and then you link it back to what you're studying.
Get your foot in the door as well. It's your rite of passage. Yeah. Tell us what happened after university. How did you transition into the real world, and what that journey looked like for you? You're a young engineer in the world.
Yeah.
If we can help other young engineers understand what that transition looks like, I guess it might bring some value to their life.
Yeah, I guess my experience led me into the contracting world. Just sort of family and background. I sort of wanted to get into contracting, and I ended up moving on to a supervisor role actually. More so than engineering. But look, the main thing with engineering, as we discussed, is that mindset that you get from university that, whatever you get tasked with, you have that approach of identifying what is the core problem, what kind of solutions are we able to, assess and take to resolve the issue.
Yeah. So you started as a site supervisor and today you're a site engineer.
It's a bit, in between.
What's the difference between the two roles? What is help us understand what a site supervisor does and how you progressed to being a site engineer and what the difference between the two roles are.
Yeah, so I guess site supervisor is more towards operations and leading a group of contractors and planning and health and safety and quality assurance and all that aspect of it. I think site engineering role might be more towards I guess, addressing design issues or conflicts, or areas where the design doesn't actually work in real life, and trying to get back with the designers and solve it.
Interesting you brought that up. How many times do you, as a site engineer, how many times do you run into that issue where a design's designed that is not feasible to build?
You're touching on a very very big part of what we face in construction.
Yep.
And look, I'm sure that there's ways of addressing that.
What I'm trying to establish is that a common occurrence?
It is.
Yep.
It is.
And what do you think the root cause of that common occurrence is? Why do we have designs out there that aren't buildable?
That's exactly it, mate. I'm trying to find the answer myself because it's definitely one of the things that frustrates me at the end of the day. Well, not frustrates me, but it just makes it more difficult. Whereas we'd want to get the process a bit more linear with getting the right design, implementing it. I guess that's part of our job, right?
100%. So let's talk about it from a site engineer's perspective.
Yeah.
What's the cost to you as a site engineer and the project? Yeah. What does it cost you that you've actually been delivered an unbuildable design?
Well, it's almost like sometimes you need to not just time to review it and get the feedback that it doesn't work. You also almost need to in some instances prove that it's not working, like translate that, so to speak, that by the way, guys, this is the issue that we're actually getting when we're trying to install it and implement that design. So there could be a bit of back and forth or not actually getting the complete answer or a partial answer because that hasn't been translated properly to the designers. So there's always that real life versus design.
So design's on paper, it's a 3D model. And how does that translate to real life when you put into bricks and mortar?
Well, here's the thing, right? I think
you're never going to get it 110% right because you're always going to make subtle changes on site.
100%.
And adapt and adopt.
And I think the main issue there, and where I'm all good for change and developing, is that I feel like because we're scratching the surface with the likes of BIM modeling and 3D modeling,
something I'm very passionate about, by the way.
I know, and this is why I want to bring it up, is that I feel like because we're not fully implementing it and we're not fully understanding it.
I don't think we ever have in New Zealand.
Yes.
Not in a single job.
Yes. And I think
it's never been implemented. So 4D hasn't been properly implemented on any job. And people refer to BIM as 3D model or clash detection.
Yeah.
And it's so much more than that.
And
it's a way of organizing your data. It's a way of collating useful information to drive data-driven decisions. And I think it's about educating people about that and getting them to go there. But sorry, I'm digressing.
You're passionate about it, mate. And
really
look, that's nice to see, right? But I think where it comes from, I guess, putting a main contractor hat on, is that what I feel anyway is if you don't implement it fully, what you end up doing is that you put a lot of effort into the likes of 3D modeling and clashes. But at some stage, because it hasn't been fully identifying those clashes in time, you end up having to do it the old school way.
Take a 2D drawing, get a group of contractors together, stand below the floor plate, and talk about where your service is run.
It just ends up being that way in some instances where you can't fully rely on the model. And that's where I feel like it's either not implementing it or we implement it right, rather than, especially if it's not, for example, a bigger project, on a small project, you might put so much effort and time and cost into getting that, and then the guys aren't actually relying on it because it's not really articulating what it should. So all for change, but when we need to implement that change, it needs to be fully, it's never going to be 100%. Neither is a 2D, right? Or walking out on site. There's always going to be design versus real life. But I think it's just not doing a half job with that transition.
Okay. Let's step back in this conversation a little bit, just a little bit, right? You said that's a big concern for you that you get design that's not 110% complete or buildable, right? Help me understand 2 or 3 key issues that you constantly run into from a design perspective to a buildability perspective. What are those roadblocks that you hit on a regular basis?
I think, I guess one thing...
Specific issues.
Yeah, specific. I don't know how specific I can get there, Andy, but I guess is
as specific as you possibly can on a podcast.
Yeah.
To the public eye. Yeah, have a think about it if you need
of a problem that
of problems that are reoccurring. Constantly. Yeah,
constantly. I don't have a specific one in mind, but the common theme there being is that the timing of design and the I guess or a buildable design, so to speak, and how it correlates to real life is all. In many instances, it doesn't sort of work with the planning and all the effort that's been put into that programming stage.
Yep.
So
that's one aspect of it.
Yeah.
But let's focus on a buildable design. Yeah. So you get given a design, which is consented. You don't need an IFC to get a consent. Right? Cool. So then you need a 90% design to get a consent, and then there's the last remaining 10% of the minor changes that happens, and you get given an IFC.
Minor.
How minor is minor? That's
how minor is minor.
That's a very relative term.
Yeah.
But, okay. Right. And then you get given an IFC, but then you end up on site, and you run into problems, right, with the design.
Yeah.
What are the reoccurring problems that you run into? Are there any specific issues that is happening consistently?
There's sometimes it's a misalignment. Sometimes it's something to do with a lot of, I guess, different aspects that haven't been accounted for. Like, for example, if we were talking services and how they're usually more of an afterthought than or passive fire, for example.
Yep.
It's not really one of those issues that all the requirements you get to look at them while you're designing the building. So you always have to sort of make it work, and then you keep running into different requirements that you just sort of.
But as a competent contractor, you get given the designs, even if it's a 90% design, and then you bring in your expertise to go, right, I'm going to review the design, come up with a program that works. Cool. Wouldn't you pick it up at that stage?
Well, you could.
Why should it only happen when you get onto site and then you have an oh shit moment?
Yeah.
As opposed to having the forethought.
Well, that might be a good point, but I guess it's the amount of those items that we need to review, and that's where the effort goes back to a contractor. And I think one of the problems is it ends up too much reliance on a contractor at the end of the day.
Yeah, and the contractor ends up taking on too much risk.
Exactly where I'm heading with it. Exactly where I'm heading with it. And look, that's a common theme. And linking it back to university, in all honesty, I remember a few of our lecturers used to say this, right? And they used to say, look, out there in the real world, a lot of the main cons are taking too much risk. This was a few years back, mate. The more I am seeing it in real life, it's not necessarily that they're taking risk. It ends up being risk, but it's not necessarily that. It's just that the fact that there's lack of design or lack of information or lack of, those details, those last 10% that they don't get right causes so much problems later down the track.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue it from both perspectives.
Exactly.
The designer's going to turn around and say, exactly. It's 10% of minor issues that you deal with on site.
Yeah.
A contractor's going to turn around and say,
exactly.
That's 10% of issues is going to cost me 90% of my time.
Yeah.
So, who's right?
Who's right? And look, and from my end, growing up, I've sort of heard in the background and all these kinds of problems, and I never really understood it until I got involved.
Yeah.
And it sort of takes, I think it takes time to get into that main contractor role, and then potentially work on a designer role to get a real feel of where the issue was.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of the best designers would have worked or gained some experience of on site.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a big advocate for having design presence on site for any project.
100%, mate.
Yeah, I mean,
100%.
One of the key things that actually eliminates is what I like to call the paper wall, right? So you run into a problem, what do?
Yeah.
raise an RFI.
Yeah.
Right? Sideball it straight to
Yeah.
him. Right? And what does he do? His
Yeah.
pile just keeps growing and growing.
And it just
he has
becomes a communication thing. And
Yeah.
you know just as much as I do. And if you ask a lot of people out there in construction, what's the main problem? They'll say communication.
Oh, it's massive.
It's
Massive. I mean,
it's really up there.
Part of the reason why I started strategic planning
Yeah.
was to help people effectively communicate. So I was on another podcast the other day. I was a guest on somebody's podcast, Josh from Australia, and he asked me, "What's the value you bring to your clients?" I didn't have to think about it.
Yeah.
I straight away said, "Effective communication."
Yeah. Yeah.
As a planner, that's really the only value that I bring to any project. And I strongly believe that actually eliminates a lot of key issues.
And there's communication barriers, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably a risk to getting that effective communication. I think, hearing some of your podcasts and seeing some of
Glad you listen to some of them.
And some of the posts that you've raised out to get a feel of what people's opinions on communication barriers. I think a lot of when you look at construction, I think a lot of your interest and passion is focusing on how data can be used and how all that whole technological advancement can be implemented to improve construction.
Smarter, faster, better, every day.
Exactly.
Simple.
But I think a lot of that, being a person who's out there dealing with the guys on a daily basis, is that you really need to include a lot of the different aspects of construction that are potentially causing communication problems or lack of efficiency, and it's not necessarily all about data or not data. And how do you quantify that, right? Because you can be changing it to data, not seeing the results that you want to see, but it's not really that change. That change is good, it's working. If all the other aspects of construction were improved and dealt with.
What specifically?
What specifically? I think there's lots to it, but I think what I'm trying to touch out is more the aspects more to do with psychological, more to do with the amount of stress that the people are going through.
Interesting.
The time, effort that gets put in. Look, main contractors are generally known to put a bit more hours into construction. I think, asking a mate the other day, what is the biggest problem in, construction in your opinion? And they'll say, mate, we put in crazy hours and we're always stressed and we're just, how does that affect any positive change that we're trying to make, right?
How many hours a week do you work?
Oh, mate, I can't have that. I can't have that brought up here.
Okay, more than 40, less than 40.
100% more than 40.
Okay.
100%.
All right. So you shouldn't have to work more than 40 hours. It's not healthy for you. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that specifically in construction? And would you say that most people in construction would work more than 40 hours? In your opinion?
In my opinion, I think they would.
Yep.
I think they would.
Yep. I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
I've been on multiple sites and I'd agree that they work more than 40. But again, in your opinion, why do you think that is? Because I have a view on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, naturally, I'll go back to the project not being set up right.
Yeah.
People in a state of chaos.
Yeah.
Unstructured information.
Firefighting rather than.
Yeah. And here's my one big problem that I have, right? The accountability for time and the accountability for cost solely sits on either one or two people in the entire project, especially in New Zealand.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the wider world.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have similar problems, but not to the scale we do.
Yeah.
We have way too much emphasis and reliance on either that project director or the lead project manager who's accountable for time and cost, the whole lot, right? That doesn't cascade down to a site engineer.
Yeah.
See, as a site engineer, are you held accountable for time and cost and quality and health and safety?
So I just want to.
You will say yes.
No, 100%. But I guess I want to bring it down just back one step, which is I was trying to focus on the point that it's not easy to quantify how much or get a feel of how much other issues are causing barriers in our advancement towards the data and towards the BIM and towards all that kind of stuff, because we're trying to make that change, but it might be other aspects that are contributing, and therefore...
Oh, 100%. There are multiple other aspects.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, I mean, psychological, that's not my area of expertise.
Yeah,
I'm an engineer and I can only focus on what I can control.
100%.
And the only thing, I mean, from my perspective, I guess, the only thing I can really focus on to add value to help projects be smarter, faster, better, make good data-driven decisions, you know, get out there and deliver with confidence. You know, I mean, I'm big on helping my clients deliver with confidence, right?
Yeah.
And effective project controls is all about that.
Yeah.
It's about giving them the confidence that, you know, you're putting a good plan. I mean,
But
for me, it's all about the data.
That accountability that you're talking about, whether it goes back to, I guess, site supervisor role, a big part of my experience has been that, rather than a site engineer. And I think it goes down sometimes to the individual. And I think when I said psychological, but I just meant more of the human factor. People have different personalities.
People have emotions.
They've got emotions, they've got stress, they've got things going on in the background. That all affects work at the end of the day. And I think that's what I'm trying to say in terms of, you know, if you're saying accountability and ownership, it really comes down to the individual. If we're talking communication, that also comes down to the individual. But how can we change that so that it accounts for the different personalities and the different things, because this is just life that we're dealing with.
Okay, let me ask you something else then, right? Okay, so since you've started in the construction industry, you've consistently worked more than 40 hours a week, right? Give or take. Yeah, I know I'm coming back to it, but hear me out, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Continue.
Why do you do it?
Why do you do it?
Why do you do it? Are you sucker for punishment?
Personally,
what gets you out of bed in the morning?
If it's personally, and again, this has nothing to do with your boss or your project or anything like that.
What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Exactly. I feel I've got ownership over the work that I'm doing, right? And I come to work. I'm just whatever I get tasked with. I've got that sensation inside that I want to give it my best shot.
Okay,
right?
cool. So now let's look at that. You can clearly tell you're quite passionate about what you do, which is good.
So in that sense, is like, if it's just the fact of getting it right needs a bit more effort from me, that's fine. But is that root cause or root issue, you know, of having to work those more hours or sorting out the problem to make sure that we're still sticking to that program or to that plan? Is it the root cause that I'm not putting enough time? I don't know.
Time's one issue.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, for anybody to succeed, you need the right team around you. You need good systems. You need good processes.
Good planning, right? And I think one aspect I'd like to touch up on is that planning, right?
Yeah, go on.
We're
open
planning
to questions, by the way.
Yeah. Planning.
Sure.
Where planning meets real life. I think a lot of the instances, there's not that much, I guess, allowance for things like QA, health and safety, that happens on site, that doesn't really get accounted in the planning stage.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it ends up being too tight of a program or things, but all I can say is that generally speaking, to anyone in the industry, you'll find that it's a common theme that they're under the pump all the time, which is the nature of the industry everywhere in the world. So that hasn't changed, but people are planning better elsewhere.
Oh, for sure.
For example.
100%.
So it's just
everywhere around the world, they're far more advanced in terms of planning, you know, compared to us. I mean, we do have not many planners in New Zealand. There aren't enough of us. But that's not the answer to your question. Why we don't allow for sufficient time to do EQA? Well, here's the. It's interesting that you bring it up, but I'll tell you from a planner's perspective what happens. Right?
And just so that you give me the right answer, when I meant QA, is also, just to account for it, is also those instances where design has to change and it just doesn't quantify that enough time to replicate that and you know, get the right.
That's change management. I'm not going to focus on change management, but I'll focus on. I'll give you an answer. I'll give you a real story as to what happens.
A real story. Give it to me, mate. All
right. So say I come up with a tender plan, right? The tender program, you have standard allowances. You go, oh yeah, this is a $40 million job. You'll have for 20 days to commission it at the back end, 20 days to do the QA. They can both happen concurrently. Cool. All right. That gets to completion. Right. Send the program. That goes to approval to the project managers or project management companies of this world and the clients, so on and so forth. And they go, oh, too long. That's not what we told the client.
Yeah.
So then you obviously go, all right, you do the right thing as a planner and you go look at the critical path and you go, shit, yep, my superstructure looks good. Everything else looks good. I can't take time off my contingency. That means I'm taking too much risk, or the main contractor will be taking on too much risk. What do? Ah, mate, there's that QA task. Oh, yeah. Just cut that short by 10 days. We'll be fine. Yeah, sweet.
Yeah.
True story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is literally what happens. You know, I mean, I worked for a project management company once, and I prepared a tender program.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of effort doing that, and the only comment they came back to me with was, can you take down the allowance for quality and for commissioning right down off the critical path? And I said, why? I don't want to do that. You know, I mean that's doing disservice to a main contractor, because I was representing the project management company.
Yeah.
And this is what the project management company told me to do. Right? And I said, I disagree with that.
And sometimes it goes on to health and safety as well.
For sure.
Because the more you plan it, the better, and you know, but sometimes you need to take that option, and it's top priority, mate.
Yeah. I mean,
you know, it's top priority to allow for that time. And if it doesn't get allowed for, you'll have to make that time elsewhere. So you know, you'll stick with those processes and systems that are out there on site, but you'll have to make up for that additional time to get everything ready for the guys to do.
You can't manufacture time, can you?
You can't.
You can't manufacture time. So, I mean, the only way you're going to save time on a job is by, you know, change the methodology, throw more resources, triple shift and throw more resources. There's no other way you're saving time on a job.
Yeah, it's usually you think about it, and realistically is how do we achieve what we have to achieve rather than trying to save time, because you know you're always on the tail end, on the back end, rather than being, you know, I wish it was that way. Let's put it that way.
Okay, let's pause there, but let's step back into your university days. Yeah. What was the course material around for planning, and do you think universities out there give enough importance to project planning in New Zealand? I know you went to a New Zealand university, and you did your engineering there. You're my first guest, I think. I mean, you're young and you're fresh out of uni.
Yeah.
So how much of importance is given to planning in universities here? And should there be more? Should there be less? What do you think? I don't know.
Look, it's an interesting topic. I think with university, it ends up with the individual to choose how many courses that are relevant to planning that they want to take.
Yeah, right.
And
how many courses are there? Few?
Oh, look, I
mean, different universities, different. Obviously.
It's probably, you know, a few years back where I was in university.
Mate,
you know,
not that long ago. Look at me.
Choosing between courses to fill up my time. I'm not too familiar with that. I guess the information's out there. You can always access it quite easily. But I don't think anyone goes to university saying, I want to be a planner. You know?
And nobody does.
And no one does.
Neither did I.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I wanted to be a Formula One race engineer. Yeah. I didn't want to be a planner.
Yeah, I wanted to do something to do with cars and motorcycles too. But you know, you end up in different areas. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So if that answers your question.
Yes, you know. I mean, I would love to go back to some of these universities and actually go, right, I'm happy to review your course material. And I strongly believe we don't have enough planners in New Zealand. I mean, they aren't enough.
And I think that whole link,
skill set,
the link between people out there in the industry and universities needs to be always strong, so that they can communicate what we need out there. And look, there might be lots of things that I'm not participating in or not having visibility over. Yeah. But it's just that at the end of the day, if no one sort of takes ownership of that aspect, when you look at the industry as a whole, then we're not really communicating between the people coming out. and then you just go out there on site and you get tasked with something.
Yeah.
And look, I've got a few things that I want to touch on
Yeah.
that are
We don't have a lot of time, but
relevant to
let's
the
go.
BIM ideas. For example, is that myself, I've always been a little bit not against, but a bit of fear from moving on to BIM and all that kind of stuff. I feel like, especially in my uni days, when you get out there and you try it, and I think that's a big part of it, is that you actually like, oh, it makes sense. You know, we can do. There is a smarter and better way. But then how do you translate that across the different capabilities and different experience levels across site? I think that's where a lot of effort needs to be put in as well.
Step change.
Step change.
Absolutely. For the last 10 years, what New Zealand's known about BIM is clash detection. There's so much more out there
that they're not using.
Oh, 100%. There's so much more out there. So here's another cool example that I'm doing. I'm running 40 sims of simulations of for tender programs, where I take the 3D model, the develop program, into Aster Power Projects. I don't know if you've heard of Aster Power Projects. It's a really cool planning tool, where you actually link the methodology to the relevant model elements, and you run the simulation, so you see your building get built. And out of some of that, some of the results I've got are great, and it's a great way to communicate through to your client and say, this is my intended methodology, because your client's not going to sit and read a million lines on a piece of paper. You know?
Yeah,
he's just going to go, I don't understand what the lines mean. You know, or what it was.
But at the same time,
the way we step change the industry, change the way we communicate, and enable better communication.
Which is good, but I think at the same time, a lot of the times as a site team, you'd get introduced to so many different platforms of communication.
For sure.
Or you know, because especially with this whole day and age where you can make a new platform so easily, so accessible. So therefore, you as a site team, everyone gets preferences, and it's just like anything. You need to lead it across.
It's about how we unite all of that into a common data lake to make better decisions and communicate better between different teams and break down those relevant silos. I talk a lot about that too, but yeah, it's how we do all of that. But yeah, mate, really appreciate you taking the time to be here. That was a really interesting chat.
Appreciate it, mate.
Thank you so much, mate. Yeah. But if you do have any other thoughts, hit me up. We'll have another yarn about it. No problem.
100%, mate. Thank you very much. And look, I think we're stepping in the right direction by bringing that conversation up and seeing where is the problem. Because if you don't identify failure, you don't improve.
Absolutely, and bring that conversation out to the open for the whole New Zealand construction industry to view and understand, and hopefully the industry gets something out of this. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, mate, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.